You are looking at a face that was never supposed to exist. Not the golden mask, the face underneath it. The real one. For almost 100 years, the world knew this pharaoh by a sheet of hammered gold. Then the machines came. And the face they pulled out of the wrappings did not match the legend at all. Here's the claim I am going to prove to you tonight. The most famous face in human history, the Boy King, the golden god of Egypt, was hiding a body so broken it could barely walk, and a secret so strange that the mask covering his face may not have belonged to him at all. That is not folklore. That is what the modern reanalysis says. It comes from a computed tomography scan run in 2005, a DNA study published in 2010, and a set of measurements. One researcher took off the golden mask itself in 2015. Every step traces back to a document, a date, a name. Stay with me, because by the end you will understand why the people who could have told us this simply chose not to. I have to tell you where this started for me. I was in a dim room looking at a photograph of the reconstructed skull, and I noticed the back of the head bulged out like a light bulb, and I could not stop staring at it, because nothing about the shining golden face prepared me for that. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment the world first met him. It is November 1922. A British archaeologist named Howard Carter has spent years digging in the Valley of the Kings for a tomb everyone told him was already emptied or destroyed. His funding is nearly gone. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, has warned him this is the final season. Then a boy water carrier stumbles on a stone step buried in the sand. Carter clears it and finds a sealed doorway, and behind it a staircase leading down into a tomb cataloged today as KV62. When Carter finally makes the small hole and holds his candle up, Carnarvon asks him if he can see anything. Carter says the words that would echo for a century. Yes, wonderful things. Inside was the almost untouched burial of a pharaoh named Tutankhamun, who died around 1323 before the Common Era when he was only about 19 years old, over 5,000 objects. A solid gold coffin weighing more than 200 pounds. And that mask, 11 kilograms of gold, inlaid with lapis, lazuli, and glass, staring out with those calm dark eyes. That mask became the face of ancient Egypt itself. It is on the textbooks, the posters, the museum brochures. When you picture a pharaoh, you picture that face. Serene, perfect, eternal. But here is the first crack. That face is a work of art. It is not a portrait. It was never meant to show you the man. It was meant to show you a god. And for 83 years, that gold was the only face anyone had. Therefore, in 2005, a team decided to find the real one. They took the mummy, the actual body of Tutankhamun, and they rolled it into a portable computed tomography scanner in the Valley of the Kings. 1,700 images. A full digital cross-section of a body that had not been truly examined since the 1920s, when Carter's team had, frankly, wrecked it trying to pry the golden mask off the resin-glued corpse. Then the scan data went to 3 separate forensic teams, one French, one American, one Egyptian. And here's the clever part. Only the French team was told whose skull they were rebuilding. The Americans were handed the data cold, with no name, no context, told only that it was an ancient male. This was a control. If 3 independent teams, working blind, produced the same face, you could trust it. The French team was led by a forensic anthropologist named Jean-Noël Vignal, and the flesh was sculpted by a paleo artist named Elizabeth Daynès, whose reconstructions sit in museums around the world. Layer by layer, they built the muscle back onto the skull. The tissue depth markers, the nose projection calculated from the nasal bone, the lips mapped from the teeth, and the face that emerged stunned the people who made it. It was soft, almost delicate. A narrow chin, full lips, a long, slender neck, and eyes that looked less like a warrior and more like a boy who had never finished growing up. The 3 teams, working continents apart, landed on nearly the same face. That agreement is what made it credible. This was not one artist's guess. This was a convergence. But it was the shape of the head that would not leave me alone. Because on that scan, the skull was elongated, stretched backward, longer front to back than a normal human skull should be. And the moment I saw that measurement, the official story started to wobble. Let me tell you why an elongated skull matters. The immediate answer everyone reaches for is artistic style. During the reign of Tutankhamun's father, art changed radically. Statues from that era show figures with long, egg-shaped heads, wide hips, thin arms, and drooping bellies. So, for decades, the assumption was simple. The stretched skulls in the art were just a fashion, an exaggeration, a religious style, not real anatomy, except the CT scan showed it was real. Tutankhamun genuinely had a somewhat elongated cranium. The art was not exaggerating a style, it was recording a body. And that is the exact point where a single strange skull turns into a family, because Tutankhamun did not have this shape alone. So a new question opened, one that no golden mask could ever answer. If the elongated head was real and it ran in the family, then who exactly was this family and what was wrong with them? To answer that, the investigation stopped being about a face and became about blood. Between 2007 and 2009, a team led by the Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass ran genetic testing on 11 royal mummies, and the results were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in February of 2010. This was not a tabloid. This was one of the most respected medical journals on Earth, and what they found rewrote the family tree of the most famous king in history. They identified the mummy in tomb KV55 as Tutankhamun's father, almost certainly the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, the king who tried to erase Egypt's gods and replace them with a single sun disk. And they identified a mummy known only as the younger lady, found in tomb KV35 as Tutankhamun's mother. Then came the sentence that stopped me cold. The DNA showed that his mother and his father were full brother and sister. The boy king was the product of a marriage between siblings, and it did not stop with him. Tutankhamun himself married his own half-sister, Ankhesenamun, and the two tiny mummified fetuses found buried with him in the tomb, his daughters never drew a single breath, both stillborn, one at about 5 months, one near full term. Now, the elongated skull made a darker kind of sense. Generation after generation of royal incest, brother marrying sister, uncle marrying niece, concentrating not just power, but disease. And when the medical team went back through the CT scan with this in mind, the boy behind the gold fell apart in front of them. He had a clubfoot, the left foot twisted inward, the bones deformed. He had a condition called Kohler disease, where the bones of the foot literally starve of blood and die. Part of his foot was rotting while he was still alive. He had a cleft palate. He was tall and thin and fragile, with a curved spine and weak, feminine hips. And then the walking sticks. Carter had pulled 130 walking canes out of that tomb. For decades, people assumed they were ceremonial symbols of royal power, treasures, scepters. But the reanalysis noticed something Carter's generation had shrugged off. Many of them showed wear. The tips were worn down. The handles were smoothed by use. These were not decorations. This king had leaned on them. He had needed them. Some scans even suggest he may have died shortly after a bad fall or a shattered leg that became infected. The Golden Warrior of Egypt was a boy who could not stand without a cane. And when they extracted ancient DNA from his tissue, they found the genetic fingerprint of Plasmodium falciparum malaria, the deadliest strain, more than one form of it in his bloodstream at once. A crippled, malarial, inbred teenager, dead before 20, hidden for over 3,000 years behind the most beautiful object ever made. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now because I thought it too, and I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes specifically, because this next part is built for the skeptic in the room. If you have been sitting there telling yourself there is a perfectly ordinary explanation for all of this, good, that instinct is healthy. Let me give the boring explanation its fair hearing, because that is what I did, and I want you to watch exactly where it snaps. The ordinary explanation goes like this. Ancient royal families intermarried all the time. Inbreeding causes birth defects. That is textbook genetics. A weak, sickly king with a clubfoot and a strange skull is sad, but it is not mysterious. And the elongated head? Cranial shape varies. The reconstruction is educated guesswork anyway, because you cannot know the exact nose or the exact lips from a skull alone. So the whole thing collapses into a simple, tragic medical story. Case closed. No mystery here. That is the position, and honestly, for a while, it held. And I almost accepted it. I really did. Because every single piece I just gave you fits inside that tidy medical explanation. The clubfoot, the malaria, the sibling parents, a doctor can explain all of it without a shred of the inexplicable. But the medical story explains the body. It does not explain the burial. And it does not explain the mask. Now, the elongated skull made a darker kind of sense. And if you feel that pull, the need to see what the official caption left out, then let me pause here for a second. You have been sitting there tonight watching a machine peel a golden god down to a frail, limping boy, and you can feel it, that itch to keep pulling the thread past where this one video stops. That is exactly what the Lost Origins Complete Library was built for. 3 evidence-based volumes. First Threshold, Deep Signal, and Hidden Systems that use AI, archaeology, and ecology to close the gap between what the textbooks admit and what the data actually shows. You get to see the real method, how AI-driven LiDAR uncovers ruins invisible for thousands of years, how to read a contested finding without being fooled, and the complete casebook you cannot get anywhere else. All readable on any device, no special app needed. And you do not have to take my word for it tonight. The landing page makes a simple, checkable claim that the official story left out the evidence. So do what I did with this pharaoh. Pick one famous finding, look up the original scan or the published study yourself, and see how much of it never made it into the caption you were taught. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. These sites and studies are not going anywhere. The gap between the official story and the data is already sitting there, waiting for anyone willing to look. And speaking of looking, the biggest thing they never wanted opened is still ahead in this very video: a sealed, painted wall. Now, back to that broken body, because the medical team was about to find something even harder to look away from. Because once you actually look at how this boy was put into the ground, the tidy explanation stops accounting for the evidence, and it never recovers. Start with the tomb itself. Tutankhamun was a pharaoh. Pharaohs spent their entire reigns building enormous tombs. Vast, deep, decorated corridors sinking into the mountain. His father's people, his successors, all of them lie in sprawling underground palaces. Tutankhamun, the king whose treasure defined Egypt for the modern world, was crammed into a tiny tomb that looks nothing like a royal burial. It is small. It is cramped. Archaeologists have long argued it looks like a private tomb, not a king's, as if it was grabbed at the last minute because his own was not ready. Then look at the paint. On the north wall of the burial chamber, the paint carries brown spots, microbial growth, the kind that forms when a wall is sealed while the plaster is still damp. In a normal royal burial, the tomb sat open and drying for a long time. This one was slammed shut in a hurry, before the walls could even dry. Something about this funeral was rushed, and the objects piled around him, the shrines, the coffins, the jewelry, many of them show signs of being made for someone else and hastily altered. Names recut, faces that do not quite fit. Equipment borrowed, reused, repurposed for a boy who died before anyone was ready. So the question stopped being what was wrong with his body. The question became, why was the richest burial ever found also the most rushed, the most secondhand, the most improvised royal funeral in Egyptian history? And that question led me finally to the mask. The golden face itself. The one object everyone assumed was above suspicion. For this, I have to introduce you to a British Egyptologist named Nicholas Reeves, a man who spent decades inside these tombs and who has an unnerving habit of noticing what everyone else walks past. And in 2015, Reeves published an analysis of the golden mask that I could not shake, because it takes the single most sacred object in Egyptology and quietly suggests it was never made for the boy under it. Look at the ears on that mask. They are pierced. There are holes in the earlobes, meant for earrings. Now, in ancient Egyptian imagery, children and women were commonly shown with pierced ears. Adult male kings, in their formal eternal portraits, generally were not. On the finished mask, those piercing holes were even covered over with gold discs, as if someone was trying to hide them. Someone made this mask for an ear that wore earrings and then tried to disguise it for a king who did not. But the piercings are only the opening. The real evidence is in the name. Every royal object carried the king's name inside an oval loop we call a cartouche. And Reeves, examining the cartouche on the mask, noticed something disturbing. Underneath the name Tutankhamun, the gold showed traces of an earlier name that had been removed and written over. The cartouche had been altered. Someone had scratched out the original owner and inscribed the boy king on top. And when researchers studied the faint traces of that earlier name, the leading reading that emerged was Ankh-Heperer Neferneferuaten. That name belonged to a woman. It was a royal name associated with the mysterious female pharaoh who ruled in the chaos right before Tutankhamun, a queen many scholars believe was Nefertiti herself, or a figure standing in her place. A woman who took the throne as a king. Sit with what that means. The golden mask of Tutankhamun, the face on every poster, the image that defines ancient Egypt in the modern mind, the object I grew up believing was the literal face of the boy king may have been forged for a woman, made for her death. And when the teenage king died suddenly, with nothing prepared, his people pried a woman's funeral mask off its intended owner, scratched out her name, carved in his, and hammered gold over the ears that gave her away. The face the whole world worships was, most likely, never his face at all. And now go back and stack every anomaly on top of that single idea and watch them all click into place at once. The cramped, borrowed tomb because his own was not finished when he suddenly died. The damp walls sealed in a hurry because there was no time to let anything dry. The reused coffins, the recut names, the altered shrines, because an entire royal burial had to be assembled overnight out of equipment made for someone else. The elongated skull and the shattered foot, because this was a fragile boy whose death caught a kingdom completely unprepared. Every strange detail is not a separate mystery. They are all the same mystery. A king died before his time, and Egypt buried him in a dead woman's gold. This is the part where I have to be honest with you about how the establishment handled it, because it matters. When Reeves laid out this evidence, much of the field did not rush to investigate it. The reaction, in many corners, was to defend the mask, to explain the piercings away as normal, to insist the cartouche traces meant nothing. The most extraordinary claim in modern Egyptology, that the golden face of Tutankhamun belonged to Nefertiti, and the reflex was not to open the case wider, it was to close it faster. And I think I understand why. That mask is not just an artifact. It is the crown jewel of Egypt's museums, the image on the tourist posters, the single most valuable piece of the entire collection. To seriously entertain that it was hijacked from a woman's grave is to unsettle the most beloved object on the planet. It is easier, so much easier, to keep the story simple. The boy king, the golden face. Do not look underneath. But I did look underneath, and so did the newest reconstructions. Because the story does not end with the 2005 face. In recent years, a Brazilian graphics expert named Cicero Moraes, working with the Italian researchers Francesco Galassi and Michael Hijacking, produced new digital reconstructions using the skull data and updated forensic methods. And once again, the face came back young, soft, almost startlingly gentle, a rounded skull, full cheeks, a child's uncertainty frozen into a king's body. Hijacking himself described it as looking more like a young student than a mighty ruler. Every time the machines rebuild him, the same person appears. Not a god, not a warrior, a frail boy. And every time, the gap between that real face and the golden mask grows wider because we now have very good reason to believe the gold was shaped around someone else's features entirely. Think about what that does to the most famous image in the world. When you look at that mask, you have always assumed you were looking at him. You were not. You may have been looking at the last queen of a collapsing dynasty, her identity scraped away in a panic, her golden face handed to a dying boy because there was nothing else ready in time. And here is the detail that genuinely unsettles me, the one I keep returning to. Nefertiti's own body has never been definitively found. One of the greatest missing persons cases in archaeology, Nicholas Reeves went further than the mask, he argued, using high-resolution scans of the walls of Tutankhamen's tomb, that there may be hidden chambers behind the painted plaster, sealed doorways plastered over and painted to disappear. He proposed that the boy king's cramped little tomb might be the outer section of a much larger, older burial, and that the person waiting behind that wall could be Nefertiti herself. Radar surveys were done. The results were argued over, contested, walked back, rerun, and left unresolved. The wall has never been opened. To this day, no one has cut through that plaster to see what is on the other side, so we are left holding this. A boy who could not walk without a cane, born from a brother and a sister, killed by malaria and a broken body before he turned 20, buried in secondhand splendor inside a borrowed tomb. His face rebuilt by machines into something soft and human and heartbreakingly young. And over that real face, a golden one pierced for a woman's earrings, stamped with a scratched-out queen's name pressed down so hard by Carter's men that it fused to his skin, as if even in the 20th century the mask refused to let go of the secret it was hiding. We spent 100 years staring at the wrong face. And the right one, the real boy, and maybe the lost queen sealed behind his wall, was there the whole time, waiting under the gold and under the plaster for someone willing to actually look. That is the feeling I cannot let go of, that the most looked at face in human history was a mask over a truth nobody wanted to lift, and that the real story was always quieter, sadder, and stranger than the legend we were handed. If you are the kind of person who cannot accept a beautiful answer just because it is beautiful, the kind who wants to know what is actually under the gold, then you already understand why I could not leave this one alone. So let me ask you directly, because I want your take on this. Those pierced ears, covered with gold discs, and a queen's name scratched out beneath the king's. Do you believe that mask was made for Tutankhamun? Or do you believe they buried a boy in a woman's face? Tell me in the comments. And tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight, because I read them and I want to know who is out here reopening these cases with me. If this is your kind of obsession, come deeper into it with the rest of us, the ones who keep prying open the files everyone else stamped closed. Because the next thread I am pulling is that sealed, painted wall in the back of the tomb, the one the radar lit up and no one has ever cut through. And I think what is waiting behind it changes everything we just uncovered. Stay with me. We are not done under the gold. Everything I showed you tonight, that was only the surface. Inside the Unexplained Society, I take you through the full forensic reconstruction, scan by scan, picking up right where this video stopped. And in there, you can ask me your own questions. I answer you myself, not some machine. You won't be alone, you'll belong here. Just point your phone's camera at the code on your screen. And if it's not for you, cancel anytime. If that pharaoh's face amazed you, wait until you see what lies hidden inside Nefertiti's famous bust. What they found there quietly rewrites the story we were always told. That's starting right now.